Hey guys, tonight we're teleporting back to 600 AD, deep into the sticky green heartbeat of the Yucatan Peninsula. Picture this: your sandal squelches into mud that's been baked soft by the midday sun, while overhead, howler monkeys argue with the rustle of saber tree leaves. Before we dive in, let's get the boring stuff out of the way. You know, the internet ritual part. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no guilt trips, just a humble request from your midnight history buddy. Now tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from, and what's the clock say? I'm imagining some of you are snuggled up at 2 AM. Others may be skipping lunch to join this adventure. Either way, let's pretend your boss isn't looking. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trailing behind a Maya trader named Tulum. At least that's what you've decided to call him, since your Nahuatl is rusty and he's too polite to correct you. His woven palm basket smells of something smoky and fruity, like overripe mangoes left near a campfire. Up ahead, the thatched roof huts of his village glimmer in the golden hour, and between them, stone hearths puff lazy curls of smoke into the humid air. That's when you smell it. A deep, nutty aroma cut with a sharp, almost medicinal edge. It's cocoa, but not the sweet, creamy kind that'd make a Swiss chocolatier cry. This is raw, primal, like the earth itself is exhaling through charred beans. Tulum drops to his knees by a low stone oven, shaped like a squat turtle, its sides carved with jagged lines that mimic cocoa pod ridges. Women in vivid hoople dresses squat beside him, rotating a flat stone slab where hundreds of cocoa beans crackle and pop. Their hands move in a hypnotic rhythm, as if they're conducting a symphony only the rainforest can hear. Here's the first fun fact. The Maya were the original chocolate alchemists, but they'd recoil at the idea of milk chocolate. To them, cocoa was sacred, bitter, and meant to be sipped like liquid courage, not nibbled as a candy bar. You lean closer, nose twitching at the scent. Part burnt toast, part wild raspberry. One of the women shoots you a sideways grin, revealing teeth stained reddish-brown from betel nut, and gestures for you to pick up a bean. It's hot, almost too hot, but you roll it between your fingers, marveling at its wrinkled purplish shell. When you bite down though, don't say I didn't warn you. Your face will scrunch up like you just sucked on a lemon dipped in coffee grounds. Bitter? Oh buddy, it's like drinking liquid perseverance. But here's the thing, this bitterness was intentional. Maya believed the gods loved the sharpness, seeing it as a sacrifice in itself. Why offer something sweet when life itself was a tangy, smoky affair? Now, historians argue about whether this roasting ritual was purely practical, to bring out flavor, or deeply symbolic to mimic the sun's roasting of the earth. Some say the temperature had to match the number of days in their sacred calendar, 260 degrees maybe. Others roll their eyes and point out that thermometers hadn't been invented yet. Either way, the smoke rising from those hearths wasn't just flavor, it was a message to the heavens, a fragrant prayer that said, hey gods of rain and cocoa, we've got beans. Let's talk. As the sun dips below the treetops, the women start humming a melody that seems to climb up the cocoa trees and nestle in their leaves. Tulum pours water from a carved calabash into a clay pot, and the roasted beans go in with a satisfying sizzle. You're already imagining a rich, steamy drink, but hold your horses, we're hours away from anything resembling hot chocolate. For now, just let the scent wrap around you like a damp blanket. Listen to the crackle of the fire, and pretend your modern sweet tooth isn't staging a revolt. This is the first step in a ritual that'll involve stone grinders, chili peppers, and maybe a blood sacrifice. Don't panic, it's just a drop, and they'll probably let you skip that part. But for now, let's linger here in the warm haze of roasting cocoa, where time moves as slowly as the river beyond the village, and every bean holds a secret even the ants haven't stolen yet. The first rays of sun are stitching through the palm fronds when Tulam taps your shoulder, motioning to a stone contraption that looks like it escaped from a prehistoric dentist's office. It's a metate, a flat grinding stone, squat and scarred, topped with a rounded handstone called a mano. The women from last night are already gathered, their hair tied back with strips of bark cloth, and beside the metate sits a woven basket of roasted cocoa beans, now cooled to a matte purplish black. Time to get to work, buddy. Hope you skipped arm day at the gym, 'cause this isn't a carry. You watch as a woman named Chekal, at least. That's what you're dubbing her, because her laugh sounds like a macaw's squawk. Drops a handful of beans onto the metate. The mano hovers above them, its surface rough with tiny pits from years of grinding. Here's the history lesson. Maya people, Maya didn't just grab any old rock for this. Metates were usually carved from granite or volcanic basalt, stones so dense they'd make your kitchen granite jealous. Why? Because the harder the stone, the less it would shed grit into the cocoa paste. Important when you're trying to impress the gods, not give them a mouthful of gravel. Chekal starts moving the mano in tight, circular motions, and the beans crackle into shards. The sound is like someone crunching cereal in a cave, echoey, deliberate. As she grinds, the room fills with a deeper, earthier aroma than last night's roasting. It's cocoa's soul, laid bare. She pauses to wipe sweat from her brow, then gestures for you to try. Go on. Don't be shy. Grab the mano. It's heavier than it looks, like holding a bowling ball shaped by time. Your first few circles are clumsy, beans skittering away like rebellious marbles, but Chekal just chuckles and taps the metate's edge. Slow, like you're dancing with a sloth. As the beans break down into a sticky, oily paste, she reaches for a small pouch tied to her hip and sprinkles something crimson onto the metate. Chili peppers, dried, ground, and smelling like a polite threat. Your nose twitches, even in paste form. This stuff means business. Now, here's the quirky twist. The Maya didn't just add chili for heat. They believed the spice woke up the cocoa spirit, like a divine cup of coffee with extra espresso. Some villagers used habaneros, others milder chilies. But one thing's for sure, your modern-day hot chocolate with cinnamon, baby stuff. This was a drink that grabbed you by the taste buds and shook them until they begged for mercy. But wait, did all the Maya groups use chili? Historians aren't entirely sure. Some argue that chili was a later addition, smuggled in from Mesoamerican neighbors, while others point to ancient pottery residue that clearly shows capsaicin traces. The debate's as spicy as the paste itself. What we do know is that by the time the Spanish showed up, cocoa chili blends were so ingrained in Maya culture, that the conquistadors couldn't even pronounce chocolate without a shudder. You dip a finger into the paste. Careful, it's still warm, and tastes well. It's like if a campfire and a jalapeno had a baby, and that baby took up residence on your tongue. Bitter, fiery, oddly addictive in a why am I doing this to myself kind of way. Chekal nods approvingly, then adds a splash of water from a gourd, turning the paste into a thick mud-like slurry. This, my friend, is the base of the sacred drink. No sugar, no milk, just pure, unadulterated cocoa grit, mixed with whatever the rainforest had lying around. As you grind, you notice the metate's surface is etched with faint spirals near the edges, like mini cocoa plant murals. Chekal sees you staring, and taps the stone. Ixcacao's wrinkles, she says, referring to the Mayan goddess of cocoa. Maya cocoa goddess. Legend has it that when she wept, her tears became cocoa beans, and the lines in metates, those are her smile lines, proof that even gods appreciate a good grind. Cute, right? Though modern archaeologists might call them tool marks. But where's the fun in that? By mid-morning, the paste is a smooth, glossy brown, ready for the next step, boiling. But before we get to that cauldron of chaos, Let's appreciate the magic of the meta-te. It's not just a tool, it's a time machine, turning raw beans into something that could fuel a god or a warrior, or just a very dedicated cocoa enthusiast. And hey, if your arm's sore from grinding, just remember, the Maya did this daily. Your Peloton bike has nothing on a stone mana. The sun's high now, a molten gold coin pressed against the sky, and Tulum's leading you toward a stone platform draped in jagged limestone carvings, snakes swallowing cocoa pods, gods with bean-shaped headdresses. At the center, a low altar glimmers with polished obsidian, and beside it sits a clay jar so ornate, you'd swear it's wearing jewelry, spirals of crushed shell, dots of cinnabar red. Inside, the cocoa paste from this morning, now thinned into a murky broth, with water from the sacred cenote, deep, cool, and tasting of limestone secrets. But this isn't just a cooking demo. A priest named Kin. His name means sun, which feels fitting for someone wearing a headdress, tall enough to touch the clouds, steps forward, holding a conch shell trumpet that wails like a homesick whale. Time for the sacrifice part. Don't panic. Remember I said maybe a blood sacrifice earlier? Yeah, maybe was optimistic. Kin produces a stingray spine, barbed, wicked, and sharper than your ex's last text. Before you can backpedal into a patch of nettles, he pricks his own thumb, letting 3 drops of blood fall into the cocoa jar. The liquid hisses slightly, as if the gods just took a sip. Here's the history bit. The Maya saw blood as sacred sap, the life force that fed the gods. Cocoa, born from the earth's blood, aka volcanic soil, needed a human counterpart to complete the cycle. It's like a divine exchange. You give us rain, we give you ours. But wait, he's not done. Shakal steps up with a honeycomb dripping golden syrup, harvested from wild stingless bees that nest in saber trees. She drizzles it into the jar, and the scent cuts through the earthy cocoa like sunlight through storm clouds. Honey wasn't just a sweetener, it was a bridge between mortal and divine, its sticky sweetness representing the god's favor. Fun fact, the Maya didn't have sugarcane, so honey was their go-to sweetener, but only for rituals. Daily life? Back to your bitter cocoa broth, peasant. You lean in, whispering to Tulum. How often do they do this? Like weekly? Monthly? He shrugs, which in Maya sign language probably means historians can't agree. See, here's the debate. Some scholars say blood sacrifices were rare, reserved for major events like solstices or royal births. Others point to archaeological evidence, pots with traces of blood residue in every village, and argue it was a daily ritual like brushing teeth, but way more metal. Kin, meanwhile, is too busy chanting to weigh in. His mantra translates roughly to "Don't spill the sacred cocoa, or the rain god will throw a tantrum." Now, here's the weird part. The honey doesn't just sweeten the drink. When mixed with blood, it creates a sticky, almost gelatinous layer on top, which Cain says is the god's breath settling into the drink. You're not sure if that's poetic or unsanitary, but you nod politely. Modern scientists would probably run a DNA test on the residue, but let's be real, they'd also miss the magic of a priest in a feather headdress, calling it divine spit. Ken offers you the jar, motioning for you to take a sip. Your brain screams, it has blood in it. But your curiosity's stronger. The first taste is surprisingly smooth. The honey tames the cocoa's bitterness, while the chili from earlier whispers in the background, like a spice that knows when to behave. The blood, you can't taste it, thank the gods, but you feel it, like a warm hum in your chest, as if the drink itself is alive, carrying the prayers of everyone who's ever sipped it. As the ceremony ends, Ken smears a dab of cocoa paste on the altar, letting it dry into a dark stain that'll probably confuse archaeologists in 1,400 years. Tulum leans in, grinning. Better than your morning latte, eh? Not exactly, but it's got character. Plus, you survived your first blood sacrifice without fainting. Go you. Now, here's the thing about Maya rituals. Nothing is simple. Every drop of blood, every dollop of honey, every grind of cocoa bean is a thread in a tapestry that connects the living, the dead, and the gods who probably have better things to do than judge your sacrifice technique. But as the sun starts its slow dip, and the jar is carried toward the village hearth for the final boil, you can't help but wonder, did the gods really care about the blood, or were they just fans of a good honey-cocoa combo? Historians may never agree, but for now, let's pretend they'd clink obsidian cups and toast to the chaos. The ceremonial jar, now freed from its blood and honey ritual, lands with a thud on the village hearth, where a three-legged clay pot waits like an old friend. This isn't just any pot. Its surface is etched with spirals that mimic cocoa vines choking a ceiba tree, and near the rim, tiny frog figures grin in low relief, symbols of Chak, the rain god. Because what's a cocoa ceremony without a little aquatic hype man? Chakal pokes the fire with a stick, sending sparks skittering up like escaped fireflies, while Tulum ladles the cocoa broth into the pot. The liquid hits the clay with a sizzle, and suddenly, the air's alive with a scent that's part jungle spice, part something almost floral. Wait, that's not chili. Chakal pulls a dried pod from her belt, long curved, speckled with white crystals, and snaps it in half. Vanilla, baby. Maya people were the original flavor innovators, pairing cocoa with vanilla long before Starbucks invented the latte. Fun fact, this vanilla comes from Vanilla planifolia, a vine that only grows here, pollinated by tiny melipona bees that sting less than your morning alarm. As the pot heats, Shekel explains the frog carvings. Shekelix laugh, she says, tapping a grinning amphibian. When the drink bubbles, it's him chuckling with the gods. Cute, but let's be real, it's also just physics. Still, you'd rather imagine rain gods giggling than talk about convection currents. The broth starts to simmer, thickening into a potion that glimmers like melted obsidian in the firelight. Now here's the history bit. Maya pottery wasn't just functional, it was a storybook. Every swirl, every creature, told the gods who was drinking, why they were drinking, and maybe a polite reminder to please send rain soon. We're running low on cocoa. You lean closer, watching the surface ripple. How long do they boil this stuff? Long enough to cook out the bitterness, or so the gods can taste it properly. Historians argue over this like it's a Super Bowl halftime show. Some say 30 minutes tops. Any longer, and the vanilla burns off. Others claim rituals required 9 hours, one for each level of the Maya underworld. Can, the priest, probably side-eyes both camps to him. The pot boils until the frogs on the clay start to sing, which translates to "until I say so, mortal." Chakal adds a handful of masa corn dough to the pot, stirring it into the broth. Wait, corn in cocoa? Trust me, it's not as wild as it sounds. The masa acts like a thickener, turning the liquid into something you could almost chew, like a savory hot chocolate stew. Modern foodies would call this umami rich, and charge $20 a cup. Back here, it's just Tuesday. Maya pots weren't glazed like your grandma's china. Instead, they were smoked, after firing, giving them a natural non-stick surface that even Gordon Ramsay would approve of. Run your finger along the pot's interior. It's smooth, almost oily from years of cocoa residue. Archaeologists find these pots buried with nobles, filled with centuries-old sludge that still smells faintly of vanilla and ambition. As the broth bubbles, Tulum tells you about a nearby village, where they add ground annatto seeds for a sunset orange hue. Makes the drink look like Squeak's hair, he says, referring to the Maya goddess of maize. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a roast, but the color is striking, like liquid fire trapped in clay. The debate over boiling time rages on in modern academia. Some cite ancient texts, stelae with cocoa-related hieroglyphs, that mention the ninth bubble as the signal to stop. Others point to chemical analysis. Boil too long, and theobromine, The stimulant in cocoa breaks down, turning your sacred drink into glorified warm mud. But here's the thing, in the moment, as the fire crackles and Chacal hums a tune that matches the pot's simmer, who cares about minutes? Time here is measured in stories, not seconds. You risk a sip. Careful, it's lava hot. And taste layers. First the punch of chili, then the smooth vanilla, followed by a nutty undertone from the masa. It's like a flavor roller coaster that forgets to have a safety harness. But somehow, you're not mad. The frogs on the pot seem to grin wider, as if they knew you'd come around. By sunset, the broth has reduced to a thick, glossy liquid, ready for the final act, the frothing ceremony. But before we get to that, let's linger on the pot itself. It's not just a vessel, it's a collaborator. It's clay absorbing the essence of every ritual, every prayer, every drop of blood and honey. Modern kitchen gadgets might be faster, but they'll never understand the art of letting time and fire argue until they produce something divine. The cocoa broth, in the frog-carved pot, has cooled to a temperature that won't melt your tongue. But Chacal's not done with it yet. She produces a wooden gourd split in half, a natural ladle, its surface polished smooth by generations of use, and dips it into the pot. Then, she does something wild. She throws the liquid back into the pot, high enough that it arcs like a mini waterfall, splashing foam onto the hearthstones. The motion is rhythmic, almost dance-like, her arms swinging in a wide loop, as if she's conducting a symphony of bubbles. This, my friend, is the Maya art of foam making, and it's way more dramatic than your barista's milk frother. You stare as tiny bubbles erupt on the surface, growing into a thick, tan crown that smells of vanilla and defiance. Chacal grins, wiping cocoa splatter from her cheek. Ix Cacao's beard, she says. In Maya belief, this foam wasn't just texture. It was the god's tangible presence, the breath of Chak lingering in the drink. Drink it without foam, and you might as well be sipping watered-down regret. Noble families even had foam judges, experts who'd rate the bubble density like it was a wine tasting. Spoiler: lumpy foam meant the gods were bored. Now here's the history nugget. Maya elites took foam so seriously, they invented specialized tools. Some villages used carved bone whisks, shaped like fish skeletons, to whip the broth into a frenzy. Others, like Tullum's crew, relied on the gourd ladle method, trusting arm strength over gadgets. Fun fact: archaeologists found a 1,300-year-old ceramic vessel in Belize, painted with scenes of foam making. Turns out dramatic arm gestures have always been part of the process. Your CrossFit arms would have been prime real estate in 600. But here's the debate. Was foam purely symbolic, or did it serve a practical purpose? Some scholars say the froth trapped theobromine, the cocoa stimulant, making the drink more potent. Others argue it was all about show. Foam as a status symbol, proof you had the time and servants to whip broth for hours. Koyin, the priest, would roll his eyes at both sides. To him, foam was the line between mortal drink and divine nectar, a physical bridge to the god's lips. They don't want sipping cocoa, he'd say. They want to taste the sky. You try the gourd method yourself, awkwardly sloshing broth onto your sandals. Chacal laughs, adjusting your grip. Not like you're swatting a jaguar, like you're tossing flowers to a canoeing guard. Gradually, your arm finds the rhythm, and foam begins to rise. Patchy, uneven. But there Tullum leans in, nodding. Better than the chief's first try. He spilled half the pot on the altar. The gods were not amused. Some Maya tribes in the highlands added ground seashells to their foam. Not for flavor, for texture. The calcium made the bubbles sturdier, like a medieval whipped cream, though I doubt they'd pair it with strawberry. Modern reenactors have tried this, and while it doesn't taste like beach sand, miracle, it does add a subtle mineral tang. Think of it as the original umami foam, before molecular gastronomy was a thing. The academic world is still divided on which foam method was correct. Was it the gourd toss, the bone whisk, or something else entirely? Some point to hieroglyphs showing nobles sipping from tall fluted cups, designed to showcase foam height, suggesting taller bubbles meant more piety. Others argue regional diversity was key. Maya culture wasn't a monolith, and neither was their cocoa foam. As the sun sets, the village gathers around the hearth, each person holding a shallow bowl. Crackle ladles the broth, making sure every serving has a generous dollop of foam. You take a sip, and the bubbles melt on your tongue like smoky clouds, cutting the broth's bitterness into something almost transcendent. It's not sweet, not really, but it's alive, fizzing with the effort of everyone who's whipped, poured, and prayed over it. Khan approaches, his headdress feathers brushing the foam as he drinks. For a moment you swear the bubbles cling to his lips like a sacred mustache, a temporary mark of the gods. Whether the foam's a divine signal or just good aeration, it doesn't matter. In this moment, surrounded by firelight and the murmur of prayers, it's magic, raw, sweaty human magic, born from arms that ache and hearts that believe a drink can bridge worlds. The first time you see a Maya noble drink cocoa, it's like watching a peacock sip nectar, over the top, slightly ridiculous, and impossible to look away from. The village chief, a man named Kanek, wears a headdress heavy with jade beads, and a loincloth woven with threads of actual gold, well, pyrite, but close enough. And in his hand rests a ceramic cup so ornate it probably has its own prayer. It's tall, fluted like a cathedral spire, painted with scenes of Ix cacao, rising from a cocoa pod, her hair made of actual crushed shell that glimmers in the firelight. This isn't a mug, it's a statement. Kanek lifts the cup with both hands, eyes closed, and sips the foam first, letting it cling to his upper lip like a fuzzy, cocoa-stained halo. Around him, lesser nobles think, guys with slightly less flashy, he addresses, do the same, their cups decorated with simpler motifs, maybe a single frog or a cocoa bean outline, while commoners like Tulam and Crackle hover at the edges, pretending not to stare. Here's the history lesson. In Maya society, cocoa wasn't just a drink, it was a status symbol, rarer than obsidian blades and more coveted than jade. Only rulers, priests, and warriors fresh from battle got the full Monty blood. Honey, vanilla, and enough foam to drown a god. But wait, did civilians, commoners, ever get a sip? That's the debate. Some scholars say no way. Cocoa was sacred, reserved for ceremonies and the elite. Others point to tiny clay pots found in peasant huts. Residue analysis showing watered-down cocoa with zero honey or blood. Basically the Maya equivalent of instant coffee. Tulim, ever the pragmatist, shrugs. We'd get scraps after rituals. Diluted, cold, maybe with extra chili to stretch it, like the gods' leftovers. But hey, better than nothing. Noble cocoa cups weren't just for show. Archaeologists found a 7th century tomb in Palenque, where a king was buried with 30 cocoa vessels, each labeled with hieroglyphs like for morning prayers, or for annoying the neighboring tribe. One cup even had a tiny spout shaped like a cocoa pod, because why drink like a pleb when you can sip from a bean's mouth? Modern baristas would kill for that kind of design aesthetic. You watch Kanak hand his cup to a servant, a kid who can't be older than 12, sweating under the weight of the headdress he's probably not allowed to wear. And notice the inside of the cup is lined with a thin layer of beeswax. Crackle whispers, keeps the drink warm longer, also makes it taste like honey, even if they skimped on the real stuff. Sneaky, but effective. The elite weren't above a little culinary deception, to maintain their aura of divine indulgence. Here's the controversy. Did excluding common people strengthen social hierarchy, or was it a practical move? There just wasn't enough cocoa to go around. Some historians argue it was both, a sacred drink for the sacred few, reinforcing the idea that rulers had a direct line to the cocoa gods. Others suggest scarcity. Cocoa trees only grew in certain regions, and transporting beans across the Maya world was risky. Jaguars, bandits, rival tribes who really loved cocoa. Either way, Kanek's cup says it all. I drink the good stuff, because the gods love me more.
You wander over to a group of warriors swapping stories, their chests painted with cocoa brown designs. Coincidence? Probably not. One of them, a scarred veteran named Balam, pulls a battered gourd from his belt and offers you a sip. It's bitter, thin, and tastes like someone forgot the honey. But there's a hint of chili and a warmth that comes more from camaraderie than the drink itself. We get the real deal after a victory, he says, tapping his spear. Until then, this keeps the gods curious.
As the feast winds down, Kanek's cup is carefully wrapped in a cotton cloth and carried to his hut, while Balaam's gourd gets tossed into the fire. Oops, maybe not that battered. The divide is clear. For the elite, cocoa is a ritualized performance, a way to drink their own importance. For others, it's a rare treat, a reminder that even the gods' leftovers can taste like triumph, if you squint hard enough. Modern critics might call this classist, and they're not wrong. But let's be real, every civilization has its fancy drinks. Maya nobles just took artisanal to a whole new level, complete with sacred foam and sculptural cups. Tomorrow, we'll follow those cocoa beans beyond the village, into the dangerous world of Maya trade, where a single bean could buy you a day's labor, or start a war. But for now, imagine lying under the stars, listening to the distant howl of a jaguar, and wondering if Kanek's cup is the Rolex of 600 AD. What does that make your coffee mug back home? A plastic sippy cup, probably. And that's okay. The morning after the chief's feast, Tulum shakes you awake with a grin that says, time to earn your cocoa keep. He's tying up bundling a woven backpack, but let's go with carrying frame, from sapling wood, stacking dried cocoa beans into netted pouches that clink like tiny brown coins. Trade day, he says, tapping a pouch. We're heading to the lowlands. Bring your sandals and maybe a prayer to Ix Cacao that the jaguars are napping. You join the caravan. 6 men, 3 dogs, and enough cocoa beans to make Kanek's ceremonial cup jealous. The trail is a ribbon of mud and roots, flanked by ceiba trees that tower like stone giants wrapped in green. Tulum explains that cocoa beans weren't just for drinking. They were Maya money, accepted from the Yucatan all the way to the Gulf Coast. A turkey, 20 beans. Obsidian blade, 50. A night in an inn, 1 bean. But good luck getting a pillow. Fun fact: archaeologists found caches of beans in ancient marketplaces, still in their netted pouches, like the world's oldest piggy banks. Except the pigs were jaguars, and the banks were often stolen by said jaguars. But here's the debate. Did Maya traders use a fixed exchange rate, or was it all haggling chaos? Some scholars point to ancient texts listing standard prices like 100 beans for a slave. Yikes. But history's rough. Others argue rates fluctuated like crypto droughts in cocoa country meant beans skyrocketed, while a good harvest made them as common as rain. Tulum shrugs. Depends on who's selling. Old Hanal in the lowlands. He'd charge double if you smiled wrong. Said it was for the god's toll. As you walk, you notice each trader's bean pouches are decorated differently. Tulum's has a simple cocoa pod stamp, while another man, X, sports a jaguar claw print. His personal brand, he says, to prove his beans are smuggled from the best groves. Loman tidbit: Maya traders used cocoa bean seals, clay tokens impressed with unique motifs, to guarantee quality. Break a seal, and you'd better hope the buyer was forgiving. Trust was as valuable as the beans themselves. Midday, you reach a river crossing, where a canoe waits, its hull carved from a single saber trunk, nose painted with a serpent's face to scare off water spirits. The ferryman, a squat man named Poach, yes, same as the death god, which is reassuring, demands 3 beans per person. Ike argues it's 2, but Poach just taps the serpent's painted fangs. Prices went up. Blame the rain god. He's been drinking too much cocoa. Needs more beans to sober up. Here's the kicker. Even as currency, beans had rules. Only perfect beans counted. No cracks, no mold, no tiny ant nibbles. Damaged beans. They became common people, commoner cocoa, boiled with extra chili to mask the flaws. It's like the Maya version of using crumpled dollar bills. Accepted, but with side-eye. As the canoe glides through crocodile-littered waters, don't look down. Just focus on Ek, counting his beans. Tulum shares a secret. Some traders cheated by hollowing out beans and filling them with mud. Got caught once. He chuckles. The buyer made them drink a gallon of bitter cocoa as punishment. They swore off fraud and cocoa. By sunset, you reach the lowland market, a chaos of thatched stalls, where parrots squawk, women grind maize, and a man with a pet ocelot offers jade beads for your beans. Tulum heads for a stall draped in cocoa pod banners, where a plump woman named Ex Mokane weighs his pouches on a stone scale. 2,000 beans, she declares. And these look like Tulum's usual quality, mediocre, but honest. He grins, trading them for a sack of salt, rare in the highlands, a roll of cotton cloth, and a tiny ceramic frog figurine for Chacal. Now the academic feud. Did cocoa bean currency extend to long-distance trade, or was it mostly local? Some say the Maya used it like Mesoamerican Bitcoin, while others argue it was too perishable. Beans rotted, were eaten by weevils, or stolen by greedy gods, or greedy humans. The truth? Probably somewhere in the middle, a system as messy and human as the mud on your sandals. As the market lights dim, Ake counts his earnings by firelight, grumbling about a Thotch's ferry hike. You're exhausted, but weirdly exhilarated. You just witnessed a transaction older than coins, where a bean wasn't just a bean but a promise, a prayer, and a passport all in one. Tomorrow, we'll see how these beans climb the social ladder, reaching gods and kings in ways even Tulum can't imagine. But for now, listen to the river hum, feel the weight of a cocoa pouch in your hand, and wonder, if you dropped a bean in 2025, would anyone know its 1400-year-old secret? Probably not. They'd just think it's litter. The morning after the trade run, Tulum wakes you not with a shake, but with the low droning hum of a conch shell. Keen's ceremonial signal, which means drop the cocoa bean and kneel. The gods are thirsty. You follow him to the village's heart, where a limestone platform rises like a giant's molar, its surface polished by centuries of bare feet and spilled cocoa. At its center sits the sacred hearth, a sunken pit ringed with stones carved to look like cocoa pods mid-burst, their seeds tiny obsidian chips that glimmer in the dawn. Keen stands before a stellar stone slab, etched with Ix Cacao's figure, her hands outstretched over a stylized cocoa tree, roots twisting into the shapes of serpent heads. Beside her, Chak the rain god squats, tongue lolling, holding a jar that drips liquid into a pool at his feet. Cocoa, of course. The stella's base is littered with offerings, dried chili peppers, a single jade bead, and a clay bowl filled with last night's leftover foam, now gone crusty. They prefer it stale, Tulum whispers, like gods who leave their coffee until it's cold. The ritual starts, with Khan smearing cocoa paste on the stella's edges, filling the carved lines, like he's coloring in a divine coloring book. Sealing the connection, he mutters, though you're pretty sure it's also to keep the ants from claiming the god's snack. Then he produces a shuka wasili, a wooden tube, fluted with cocoa leaf motifs, and inserts one end into the ceremonial jar from 3 nights ago, the one with blood and honey, now reheated to a simmer. The other end, he points it at the stela, like he's giving the gods a straw. Wait, are they pouring cocoa into the stone? Ken nods, eyes closed. The stela drinks for them. Their mouths are in the sky. We fill their throats through the earth. Here's the history bit. Maya rituals often treated statues and stelae as physical avatars of the gods. capable of consuming offerings. Archaeologists find countless pots with residue aimed at stone lips, leading some to argue that divine consumption was literal. If you couldn't see the god drink, was it even a sacrifice? Others say it was symbolic, a way to act out the exchange without wasting good cocoa. Some altars, but let's say sacred platforms, had hidden chambers beneath them, filled with miniature cocoa vessels and tiny figurines of gods holding jars. Think of it as the Maya version of a deity's go bag, stocked for when they dropped by for a quick cocoa break. One excavation in Copan found a 7th century altar with a ceramic god figure literally embedded in the stone, its hands outstretched for a cup that was never there. Talk about eternal thirst. Can hands you the Chikawa Zidli, motioning for you to feed the stella. You hesitate. What if you spill on Ixcaco's sacred cocoa tree? But Tolim gives you a gentle push, and you aim the tube at her carved lips. The broth glugs out, pooling in the stone's grooves, creating a dark mustache on the goddess's face. Canin beams, apparently crooked cocoa beard, divine approval. As the liquid seeps into the stone's pores, King chants a prayer that translates roughly to, "Gods of bean and foam, let our trees bear fruit thicker than Chak's tears, and our enemies' cocoa pots crack like dry riverbeds." It's equal parts poetic and petty, which feels very human for a divine plea. You wonder if the gods ever get tired of cocoa. Do they crave a nice maize beer now and then? Historians debate this too. Was cocoa the only sacred drink, or did the gods have a pantry of favorites? The stelae don't say, but Chin's prayers sure are cocoa-centric. Here's the academic head-scratcher. When Maya texts mention the gods drank, did they mean the liquid vanished, evaporated, absorbed by stone? Or did they literally believe the deities sipped it? Some scholars point to the word chokolaige in ancient scripts, which means both to drink and to satisfy a god's hunger. It's a linguistic loophole. Was the drink for the gods' bellies, or their glory? Even modern translators argue over it, like arguing whether a tree falling in a forest makes a sound if no god is around to hear it. After the stella's meal, Keen distributes the remaining broth, now lukewarm and stone-flavored, to the gathered villagers. You sip, noticing a gritty texture from the limestone residue. It's not great, but hey, it's blessed by Ixcaco's cocoa beard, so you pretend it's the nectar of the gods. Tulim winks. Tastes like history, doesn't it? Better than the stuff we traded, at least. As the sun climbs, you linger by the stela, tracing the cocoa paste that's now drying into the stone's cracks. Whether the gods drank or not, the ritual worked its magic. Everyone here feels connected to the earth, the beans, and the idea that somewhere beyond the treetops, a deity might be smacking their lips over a stone-cold cup of cocoa. Tomorrow we'll explore how these rituals changed with the sun and moon, because in Maya time, every hour has a cocoa-related agenda. But for now, let the hum of the conch shell fade into the rustle of leaves, and imagine the stella's cocoa mustache slowly darkening, a silent promise that the gods, whether they sipped or not, are still listening. The jungle night hangs thick as the cocoa paste you helped grind, but Tulim nudges you awake again, his torch flickering like a nervous firefly. "Moonrise ceremony," he whispers, and you squint at the half-moon peeking through the palm fronds. "Thought we did this at sunrise," you mumble, rubbing sleep from your eyes. He just shakes his head. Day rituals are for the sun god, the warriors. Night? That's when the moon goddess gets her cocoa fix, and trust me, she's picky. You follow the torchlit procession to a different clearing, where a low stone platform lies bathed in silver light. This altar is smaller, more delicate, its edges carved with crescents and stars. Instead of fierce cocoa pods, Ken stands at the center, his headdress replaced by a simpler crown of moonflower vines, and beside him rests a smaller clay pot, its surface painted with silvery swirls that mimic the moon's reflection on water. Chakal approaches, carrying a jar of cocoa broth that looks different. It's lighter in color, almost golden, and when she stirs it with a wooden spoon, The liquid sparkles like it's sprinkled with stardust. No chili, she says, grinning. Ixchel, the moon goddess, likes it sweet and smooth, like her silvery robes. Here's your history bite. Maya astronomy was wild. They tracked the moon's phases with such precision that their calendars were more accurate than some modern planners, and each lunar cycle had its own cocoa recipe, as if the moon's mood affected her taste buds. As Kin begins to chant, his voice takes on a different cadence, softer, slower, like the ebb and flow of the tide. The words seem to dance between the trees, mingling with the chirping of cicadas. You catch snippets. Ixchel, we offer you the cream of the bean, the foam of the night sky. Suddenly, he reaches into a small pouch and sprinkles something onto the broth. Tiny white crystals cascade in, and the scent of icanostal, a prickly pear cactus fruit, fills the air. It's sweet, tart, and oddly refreshing, like a tropical cocktail in ancient form. Some Maya communities believed that drinking cocoa under a full moon could grant you visions. Not the psychedelic kind, more like prophetic dreams about your next harvest, or whether that cute weaver in the next village liked you back. Archaeologists found clay tablets, etched with moon cocoa recipes, that included ingredients like morning glory seeds, mild hallucinogens and honeydew, as if the Maya were brewing a cup of destiny. Of course, modern historians debate whether these were actual ingredients, or just poetic license. Did they really risk tripping during a sacred ritual, or was it all for show? Ken dips a ladle into the pot, and begins to pour the liquid from one vessel to another, higher and higher, creating a towering column of foam that glows in the moonlight. Ixchel's mane, he whispers, his eyes fixed on the frothy crown. Unlike the day foam, this one is airy, delicate, as if spun from moonbeams. Some scholars argue that the cooler night air affected the foam's texture, while others insist it was pure magic, the moon goddess adding her own touch to the drink. You're handed a shallow shell cup, filled with the golden broth. As you bring it to your lips, you notice tiny floating petals, chamomile perhaps. The taste is a revelation. The bitterness of cocoa is almost entirely masked by the sweetness of the aconocil and the floral notes. It's like sipping a moonlit meadow, and you can almost imagine Ixchel herself nodding in approval. But here's the ongoing academic argument. Were night and day cocoa rituals truly separate? Or did they blend together in practice? Some texts suggest that the line between sun and moon ceremonies blurred during festivals, with warriors and priests sharing both types of cocoa. Others point to the distinct ingredients and settings as proof of a strict divide. Kian, of course, would tell them all to hush. He's too busy making sure the foam doesn't collapse before the moon reaches its peak. As the moon climbs higher, the villagers settle down to drink and share stories. Tulin tells you about a time when the moon goddess was said to have appeared as a white jaguar, prowling through the cocoa groves and leaving behind paw prints filled with sweet cocoa. You're not sure if it's the drink or the moonlight, but you find yourself believing every word. The night wears on, and the last of the cocoa is sipped. The foam has long since vanished, but the memory of that golden moon-kissed drink lingers. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, and it'll be back to the spicy, earthy cocoa of day rituals. But for now, as you stumble back to your hut, under the watchful eye of Ixchel, you understand why the Maya believed in the power of a well-brewed cup, especially when the moon is out, and the gods are thirsty for something sweet. The morning after the moonlit ritual, Chakal drags you into the Yulin before the sun's even finished its cocoa, a woven basket slung over her shoulder and a machete in hand that's seen more cocoa pod massacres than you've seen coffee runs. Time to meet the secrets, she says, grinning like a kid about to raid a honeycomb. You're not sure if she means the Shengliao spices, but your nose is already twitching at the humid air somewhere ahead. Something smells like citrus wrapped in smoke, with a hint of cinnamon, but sharper, wilder, like the forest itself decided to bake a pie. She pauses, at a scraggly tree with heart-shaped leaves, their undersides fuzzy as a baby howler monkey. Hosha Santa, she says, plucking a leaf the size of your face. It smells like unease. And Pepper had a baby, with a minty kick that wakes up your sinuses. Maya people didn't just toss this into cocoa for fun. They believed it was a bridge between worlds. Its scent powerful enough to wake the gods' noses during rituals. Modern science would later discover it's antibacterial, but back here, it's magic, plain and simple. Next, she points to a shrub, covered in crimson berries, their stems sticky with resin. Akyate, she says, scraping some into the basket. Gives the drink blood of the sun. The berries are ground into a paste, turning cocoa broth into a vibrant orange, like liquid sunset. Historians agree this was both for color and symbolism. Maya gods loved flashy drinks, and a neon orange cocoa, perfect for impressing visiting deities. But here's the debate. Did the color matter more than the taste, or did Akyate add a nutty depth? Even the gods couldn't resist. Scholars still squabble, though Chakal rolls her eyes. Taste it and tell me it's just for show. She leads you deeper, where a vine hangs heavy, with small brown pods that rattle like tiny maracas. Allspice, she says, popping one into her mouth. You wince, expecting bitterness, but it's warm, clove-like, with a hint of juniper. Maya traders called this pimienta, and it wasn't just for cocoa. They believed it scared away evil spirits lingering in the foam. Fun fact, centuries later, Spanish conquistadors would mistake this for black pepper, but to the Maya, it was the spice that made cocoa bite back in a friendly way. Deep in the Belizean lowlands, archaeologists found a 6th century burial with a pouch of zekaletsali, a spice made from toasted sesame seeds, mixed with ground coral. Yes, coral. The Maya thought its mineral crunch mimicked the teeth of the gods, a texture meant to remind drinkers that even divine cocoa had a bite. Modern reenactors have tried it. Reviews range from surprisingly umami to like drinking a bee. Chakal pauses at a towering saber tree, its roots twisted into natural steps. High above, a cluster of white flowers dangles, their scent heady and intoxicating. Cacao, huasca, she murmurs, the cocoa vine's spirit. These flowers were rarely used, only in rituals for Ix Cacao herself. Their essence, added drop by drop to the broth. Historians debate whether this was a real plant or a myth. No one's found physical evidence, but oral traditions swear by its existence, like the Maya version of a unicorn spice. As you gather the last of the Horsanta, Chakal explains the real secret of the recipe. It's not just what you add, but when. Achelta, at sunrise. Allspice under a waxing moon. Horsanta, only when the cocoa trees bloom. The gods have preferences, she says, winking. Ix, Cacao, hates when you rush the Achelta. Says it makes her lips pucker like a sour sapote. Back at the village, she dumps the spices into the metate, alongside roasted cocoa beans, their aromas colliding like a tropical storm in stone. As she grinds, you realize something. Every spice here is a story, a compromise between practicality and faith. A Kyoto stains your hands orange. Perfect. Now you look like you've been blessed by the sun god. Horsha Santa repels bugs. Bonus, the gods don't want mosquitoes in their cocoa. The academic world is still split on whether these spices had actual ritual significance or were just tasty additions. Some argue the Maya were culinary geniuses, using local flora to enhance a bitter base. Others insist every seed and leaf was a coded message to the gods, a botanical language written in flavor. Chakal, ever the pragmatist, sums it up best. Does it matter? The gods drank, we drank, and the cocoa didn't taste like mud. Win-win. By midday, the paste is a fragrant, rust-colored sludge, ready for boiling. You sneak a taste. Hoja Santa's anise hums under the achiote's warmth. Allspice, adding a spicy exclamation mark. It's complex, layered, nothing like the one-note cocoa of your first day. Crackle nods, satisfied. See, the gods don't want boring. They want a drink that tells a story. Their story, our story. The story of a tree and a stone, and a million tiny choices that turn bitterness into something worth sacrificing for. As the pot begins to simmer, releasing curls of spiced steam into the jungle air, you think about modern chocolate. Smooth, sweet, predictable. It's missing something. The chaos, the gamble, the knowledge that every ingredient is a thread in a web connecting earth, sky, and the people who grind them together. Tomorrow, we'll dive into the vessels that held this liquid magic. Because in Maya world, the cup is just as sacred as the cocoa inside. But for now, let the scent of Hosha Santa cling to your clothes, and imagine Crackle's machete swinging at another cocoa pod, releasing beans that will one day become someone else's divine secret. You find Sutojil hunched over a coil of volcanic clay, his fingers moving like spiders spinning a pot-shaped web. He's the village potter, a man with hands scarred by fire and cocoa stains, and before him lies a half-formed vessel that already looks alive. Its curves mimic a cocoa pod mid-swirl, its lip rimmed with tiny frog faces that seem to grin at the rising sun. Not just a pot, he grunts, slapping clay into place. It's a voice for the cocoa. If the gods don't like how it looks, they'll spit the drink back at her. Maya pottery wasn't just art, it was engineering, theology, and theater in clay. Sutojil uses a blend of kaolin clay, but let's say White River clay, and volcanic ash, fired in a pit oven stoked with cocoa husks, to give the vessels a subtle chocolatey smoke finish. Fun fact, the ash acts as a natural flux, melting into the clay to form a glassy surface long before glazes were invented. Archaeologists call this self-glazing, but Sutojil just calls it Ix Cacao's kiss. As he carves spiral patterns into the pot's side, you notice each groove ends in a tiny dot. Cocoa beans falling into the underworld, he explains. Near the base, a row of glyphs spells out something like foam rises. Gods descend, though your hieroglyph translation is rusty. Read non-existent. Here's the history bit. Maya pots often carried dedications to specific gods, like personalized mugs that said, Chayak's favorite. Do not use for mortal coffee. Elite vessels even had owner's marks, like tiny signatures in clay, so when the gods stole a sip, they'd know who to thank. Some ceremonial pots had hidden chambers. Sutojil taps the pot's base, which sounds hollow. For offerings, he says, like a bee's honey pot. For the gods, archaeologists have found pots with tiny figurines, jade beads, or even dried cocoa beans sealed inside, like the Maya version of a fortune cookie, except the fortune was don't anger the rain god. One pot in Copan held a miniature clay jaguar, because nothing says sacred ritual like a tiny ceramic predator guarding your cocoa. But here's the academic feud. Were these vessels only for rituals, or did nobles use them for daily sipping? Some scholars point to mundane pots with simple designs, arguing that even elites had casual cocoa mugs. Others insist every vessel was sacred, down to the humblest gourd. After all, when your drink is a bridge to the gods, nothing is casual. Sutojil scoffs at the debate. Nobles used fancy pots to feel special. Commoners used gourds to not starve. The gods don't care about pottery. They care about the foam. He hands you a small, unglazed cup, shaped like a cocoa pod. Its surface rough, from the potter's thumb. Try it, he says. You fill it from the communal hearth pot, now simmering with yesterday's spiced paste. The clay absorbs some of the heat, making the drink sippable, and the unglazed interior clings to the broth, enhancing the chili's lingering warmth. It's a humble vessel, but it feels honest. No frills, just function and faith. Sutojil notices your appreciation. See? The best pots talk to the drink, not the eye. The chief's fancy cups, they're all show.
Last week his big ceremonial jar cracked because he wanted it too tall.
I told him, gods don't need skyscrapers to drink. He still hasn't paid me. The debate rages on in modern museums. Curators display elaborately painted pots as art, while anthropologists argue they're tools first and foremost. But here, in Sutujil's workshop, the line blurs. Every coil of clay, every carved frog, is both practical, will it hold liquid, and poetic, will it make the gods smile. When he places the cocoa pod pot into the fire, he doesn't just say firing, he says blessing, as if the flames are Cacao's hands, shaping the clay into something more than earth. As the sun sets, Sutujil presents the finished pot to Kin, who nods solemnly and smears cocoa paste on its rim as a welcome gift to the gods. Later, you watch Shukal ladle broth into it during a small ritual, the frog faces seeming to drink alongside the villagers. It's not the most ornate vessel you've seen, but it's alive with purpose, the kind of thing that makes you wonder if modern ceramicists, with their kilns and glazes, have lost something vital in their pursuit of perfection. The first time a Spanish conquistador sips Maya cocoa, it's like watching a cat taste lemonade, face scrunching, eyes watering, hand instinctively reaching for a non-existent mug of sugar. It's 50-21, and you're standing in the shadow of Hernan Cortez's armor, which clanks like a walking iron pot, cauldron, but let's say metal thunderpot, as he glares at the golden brown broth in his hand. This is your divine drink, he snaps, voice thick with Castilian disdain. It tastes like the devil's own swamp water.
Ah, the clash of cocoa cultures.
The Maya, ever polite, offer him a refill. The Spanish, ever convinced their way is best, dump a pouch of cane sugar into the pot, turning the sacred broth into something syrupy and sacrilegious. Here's the history bomb. The Spanish didn't just tweak Maya cocoa, they colonized it. They called it chocolate, a mangled version of the Nahuatl chocolate, bitter water, and set about stripping it of blood, chili, and any god that wasn't explicitly Catholic. By the 1600s, European nobles were sipping cocoa with honey, cinnamon, and absolutely no blood sacrifices, a sanitized, sweetened version that would make Cacao weep cocoa tears. Some Maya priests turned the Spanish obsession with sugar to their advantage. In secret ceremonies, they'd add a pinch of sugar to cocoa offerings, calling it the white gold of the conquerors, as if bribing both Christian and Maya gods with a compromise. Archaeologists found colonial-era pots with residue containing both chili and sugar, a culinary rebellion, hidden in plain sight. Cortés, meanwhile, was too busy shipping cocoa beans back to Spain to care about cultural nuance. He thought the drink had energetic properties, which basically meant it kept his soldiers awake during long marches, a far cry from the Maya belief that it connected them to the divine. By the 17th century, European apothecaries were selling cocoa as a cure for melancholy, unaware that for millennia, Maya people had used it to cure, well, not melancholy but the existential dread of living in a jungle filled with jaguars and gods who demanded blood with their breakfast. Now, the academic debate: did the Spanish destruction of Maya cocoa rituals erase their core, or did the Maya simply hide the old ways? Some scholars argue that post-colonization, cocoa became purely medicinal or recreational, its sacred roots chopped like a saber tree. Others point to modern Maya communities still using cocoa in rituals, claiming the spirit of Cacao survived, just wearing a sugar-coated disguise. The truth, probably as murky as a colonial cocoa pot left unwashed. You watch as a Spanish friar, Father Lopez, watches the Maya prepare cocoa. He furrows his brow at the chili, brightens at the sugar, then gasps when Chacal adds a drop of honey. This is like the Eucharist, he declares, missing the irony of comparing a blood and foam ritual to Catholic communion. Soon, cocoa is served at Mass, minus the blood, thankfully, but with a new symbolism: the bitter bean, as Christ's suffering, the sugar as divine grace. The Maya nod along, because when in Rome, or in a Spanish mission, you sip like the Romans. But not all changes were bad. The Spanish introduced new tools, copper kettles, that heated cocoa faster than clay pots, silver spoons, that replaced gourd ladles, though they promptly tarnished from the chili. Maya potters, ever adaptive, began decorating vessels with Christian motifs, crosses alongside cocoa pods, saints sharing space with cacao. It was a visual compromise, a way to keep making art, while avoiding the Inquisition's glare. Here's the kicker. By the 18th century, even the Spanish crown couldn't deny cocoa's power. They established royal monopolies on bean trade, taxing every pod like it was gold. Meanwhile, in the Yucatan, Maya farmers continued to grow cocoa, whispering old prayers to the trees as they harvested, knowing that while the conquerors took the beans, they could never steal the stories embedded in the soil. Modern historians still argue over the true legacy of colonial cocoa. Was it cultural genocide, or a blending of traditions? Did the Spanish improve cocoa, or did they commit a culinary sin worse than pineapple on pizza? Spoiler, it's the latter. Sorry, history. As the sun sets on this chapter of cocoa history, you linger in a colonial-era mission, where a Maya woman named Lila stirs a pot of cocoa for the friar. She adds a dash of chili when he's not looking, then winks at you for courage. She whispers, and you realize that some traditions don't die. They just learn to whisper, hiding in the spices, waiting for the day when they can shout again. Tomorrow we'll fast forward to the 21st century, where archaeologists and chefs alike are trying to resurrect the Maya cocoa ritual. One bitter, chili-spiked sip at a time. But for now, imagine Lila's pot, simmering in the shadows, the steam carrying both the scent of Spanish sugar and the ghost of cacao's ancient laugh. The conquerors thought they'd tamed the cocoa bean, but some things like the taste of defiance can't be sweetened away. You're standing in a 21st century lab, squinting at a microscope slide, where tiny flecks of 1400-year-old cocoa residue glow under UV light. Beside you, Dr. Elena Rojas, archaeologist and cocoa evangelist, taps the glass with a pen. See that? Calcium oxalate crystals. Proof they used masa. And this? She points to a smudge of red. Capsaicin from Chile. They weren't just winging it. They had a recipe. Modern Maya cocoa revival is part science, part rebellion. Over the past decade, researchers like Dr. Rojas have been reverse engineering ancient recipes by scraping residue from pottery shards, like forensic scientists solving a millennia-old culinary mystery. Fun fact: in 2018, a team in Belize analyzed a pot from a royal tomb and found traces of honey, chili, and salmonella. Oops, guess even gods didn't mind a little bacteria. This confirmed what Maya oral traditions always said: sacred cocoa was a messy, alive thing, not a sterile ritual. Some modern chefs are taking it a step further. In a Oaxacan kitchen, Chef Lucas Gutierrez grinds cocoa beans on a replica metate, swearing the stone's memory enhances the flavor. He adds harsha santa and achiote, just like Chacal did, but throws in a curveball: mealworms, protein. He shrugs, and the Maya probably ate them too. We just forgot. Archaeologists haven't found worm residue yet. The debate, though, is fierce. Can a 21st century version ever be authentic? Purists like Dr. Rojas argue yes, if you use heirloom cocoa varieties like Criollo, the champagne of beans, ancient tools, and no sugar. Others, like Chef Lucas, say authenticity is a moving target. The Maya changed their recipes over time, he says, stirring a broth with modern vanilla extract. Why can't we? Historians sigh, torn between academic rigor and the reality that most people prefer their cocoa without blood or mealworms. You taste a purist version at Dr. Rojas's lab. Bitter, chili-spiked, with a hint of masa that's more cornbread soup than hot chocolate. It's challenging but weirdly addictive, like sipping a history book that's being steeped in fire. It's not about liking it, Rojas says. It's about respecting what it was, a drink that asked something of you. No instant gratification, just effort and faith. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, a Maya community has started offering ritual reenactments for tourists. They wear replica hairdresses, grind beans on metates, and even do a sanitized blood sacrifice. Grape juice, thankfully. Critics call it Disneyfied, but the villagers shrug. It pays for our kids' schools, and the tourists leave with respect. Maybe the gods understand. Is commercializing ancient rituals a betrayal, or a survival strategy? Some scholars argue that commodifying cocoa's sacredness strips it of meaning, while others point out that Maya people have always adapted first to Spanish sugar, now to Instagram influencers craving authentic content. Dr. Rojas hands you a modern hybrid drink, Criollo Cocoa, ground on a metate, mixed with chili and a tiny drop of honey. It's still bitter, but the honey softens the edges, like a bridge between eras. This is the compromise, she says. We can't live in the past, but we can carry its flavors forward. As you leave the lab, rain patters on the roof, mimicking the jungle's rhythm. Somewhere, a chef is probably experimenting with cricket protein in his cocoa foam, while an archaeologist debates whether maize was really a staple ingredient. But in the end, the magic of Maya cocoa isn't in getting the recipe perfect. It's in the fact that after 1400 years, we're still arguing, still grinding, still trying to taste what they tasted. You're standing in a modern Maya village in Guatemala, where the air smells of diesel and cocoa, a paradox of past and present. It's the Day of the Dead, and the town square hums with activity. Women in traditional hopels grind cocoa on metates beside pickup trucks, while kids in sneakers chase each other, sticky hands clutching plastic bags of chocolate caliente, a modern blend that's equal parts Maya chili and Spanish sugar. On a makeshift altar, alongside photos of ancestors, sits a ceramic pot, painted with cocoa pods and Christian crosses, a reminder that traditions, like cocoa beans, can be ground and reshaped without losing their core. Maya cocoa isn't just a relic, it's a living thread. In communities like San Juan Chamula, rituals still begin with a cup of bitter cocoa, offered to ancestors before any decision is made. Elders say it wakens the memory in the blood, a belief that echoes cacao's ancient role as both goddess and nurturer. Archaeologist Dr. Rojas once told you, cocoa is their Facebook, how they share stories, settle disputes, honor the dead. Modern Maya artists are turning cocoa into pigment. In Chiapas, painter Julia Lopez grinds roasted beans into a fine powder, mixing it with tree sap to create deep browns that she calls cacao's tears. Her latest mural, depicting a colonial-era Maya woman hiding a cocoa pod under her Spanish skirt hem, hangs in a Mexico City gallery, sparking conversations about resistance and resilience. Cocoa isn't just a drink, she says. It's our skin, our secret, our scream. Do scholars overstate cocoa's spiritual role in Maya life? Some critics argue that post-colonial romanticism has turned cocoa into a magical totem, ignoring its practical uses as food, currency, and medicine. Historian Dr. Carlos Mendez puts it bluntly, yes, it was sacred, but so was maize. Let's not pretend cocoa had a monopoly on the divine. Yet Maya elders roll their eyes at this, pointing to rituals where cocoa is still the first offering, the last word in disputes, the bridge between the living and the gone. You join a group of teenagers gathered around a fire, passing a gourd of cocoa. They've added something fizzy soda maybe, but the chili bite is still there, defiant. My abuela says we're ruining it, laughs a girl named Marisol, but she adds marshmallows to hers. Tradition changes, you know. It's a truth the Maya have always known. Rituals evolve like rivers, shifting course but keeping their source but let's say origin intact. In the town hall, a debate rages over whether to bid for UNESCO status for Maya cocoa rituals. Some want to protect the tradition, others fear it'll turn into a tourist zoo. like the authentic ceremonies, where visitors pay to watch staged blood sacrifices. Grape juice. Always grape juice. We don't need outsiders to validate our history, snaps a farmer named Thomas. Cocoa is ours. Always has been. Always will be. As the sun sets, the altar's cocoa pot is passed around, each person taking a sip before smearing a dab on the stone surface. It's bitter, slightly burnt, but when Marisol's abuela presses your hand and says "Es el sabor de sobrevivir," it's the taste of survival. You get it. This isn't just a drink. It's a rebellion, a refusal to let centuries of conquest erase a flavor, a memory, a god. The academic world may never agree on cocoa's true legacy, sacred vessel, economic driver, or cultural chameleon. But here, in this village, it doesn't matter. Cocoa is in the laughter of the teenagers, the steady grind of the metate, the prayers whispered over steaming pots. It's a language without words, a history you taste, a defiance as bitter and unapologetic as the first sip of pure, unadulterated sacolata. The fire has dwindled to embers, their glow mirroring the soft red of dawn, peeking through the rainforest canopy. You're back in Tulam's village, but the air feels thinner, as if time has folded in on itself. Modern and ancient overlapping like layers of cocoa paste. In one hand, you hold a shard of ceramic pot, its surface still stained with 120-year-old cocoa residue. In the other, a mug of modern artisanal hot chocolate, smooth and sweet, betraying no hint of chili or blood. The Maya cocoa ritual isn't just a footnote. It's a ghost that walks among us. Every time you stir a spoon through chocolate, you're mimicking the foam-making motions of crackle. Every craft chocolate shop that boasts ancient techniques is whispering her name. Archaeologists now realize that Maya cocoa wasn't just a drink. It was a system, a way of life, where every bean connected agriculture, astronomy, and faith. Dr. Rojas once wrote, "To understand Maya cocoa is to understand how they saw the universe as a bitter, frothy miracle." In 2023, a team of geneticists traced the DNA of modern cocoa trees back to the Yucatan, proving that every chocolate bar on Earth is a descendant of the beans Tulam traded. Even the Swiss, masters of milk chocolate, owe their success to a Maya farmer who once whispered a prayer to Ixcacao before planting a pod. Did the Maya rituals end with colonization, or do they persist in hidden forms? Some argue that when Maya communities today serve cocoa at weddings or funerals, they're keeping the old ways alive, stripped of blood but rich with memory. Others say the ritual's soul died with the last priest, who knew how to feed a stella with a chica-wisely tube. The truth, as always, is murky, like cocoa broth before the foam rises. You set down the ceramic shard and sip the modern chocolate. It's pleasant, unchallenging, but missing the edge, the chili that made you gasp, the bitterness that demanded respect. In that absence, you realize the core of the Maya secret. Their cocoa wasn't about pleasure, it was about participation. To drink it was to enter a story, to become a thread in a web that connected the living, the dead, and the gods who might or might not have enjoyed a good chili kick. As the dawn light strengthens, the village fades, replaced by the hum of your fan and the glow of your phone screen. But the scent lingers, smoky, spicy, sweet in its own stubborn way. The Maya would tell you that's Ixcacao's doing, a final gift from the past, a memory that clings like cocoa residue to the soul. Scholars will keep debating the right way to make the drink, the true meaning of the foam, and whether blood was ever really necessary. But you don't need their answers. You have the feel of a metate under your hands, the taste of chili on your tongue, and the knowledge that some mysteries are meant to be sipped, not solved. Now let your breath slow, like the rhythm of a distant metate grinding beans in a dream. Imagine the soft glow of a Maya hearth, the flicker of firelight on clay pots, and the murmur of a language that turned cocoa into poetry. The scent of roasted beans drifts through your mind, gentle now, no longer bitter, just a warm, ancient hum. Feel the weight of time ease off your shoulders. The debate over foam and sacrifice fades, replaced by the quiet certainty that some stories don't need endings. They linger like the aftertaste of cocoa, softening into sleep, wrapping you in a blanket of centuries-old whispers. As your eyes close, hear the river of history flow past, Tulam's laughter, Chakal's hume, the conch shell's distant wail. They're not gone, they're part of the dream now, floating on a tide of foam and faith. Sleep deeply, knowing the mystery of the Maya cocoa ritual is safe in the quiet corners of your mind, waiting to be dreamed again.